Hello, and welcome to the Educated Women Uplifted podcast. I am your host, Debbie LeBlanc, and I am joined by my co-host, Beverly Hall Vaughn. Today, we are honored to be joined by someone who has lived the experience of kidney registration. Joining us today is Samantha Hill, Vice President of Marketing with National Kidney Registry. Welcome, Samantha.
Thank you.
Today's conversation is one that is deeply personal, incredibly important, and honestly life-changing. We're talking about kidney donation and the impact it has on individuals and families, and the powerful work being done to make transplants more possible through organizations like the National Kidney Registry. But before we get into the science and the systems, we want to start with the human side of the story, because behind every transplant is a real person, a real journey, and a life that's been forever changed. Samantha, can you tell us a little bit about your story and how you came to work with the National Kidney Registry?
Sure. So it was a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because when I was 10 years old, I went into the hospital for what seemed like a virus that wouldn't go away, like most kids get. And they proceeded to do some blood tests. We're very shocked with the results. Since I was, again, 10, it's kind of odd to see a 10-year-old in kidney failure, but it does happen. And we found out I was in kidney failure. It turns out it was a genetic condition, very, very rare. Nobody else in my family had it. And so, we then said, okay, well, what's next? How do we get her better? Well, there really isn't getting better when your kidneys have failed. Sometimes there are cases of acute failure, but generally speaking, it's chronic. It's end-stage renal disease, ESRD, and you need a transplant. So I immediately went on to dialysis, which is kind of the short-term fix for that. And we started looking. Now, what I'm going to be talking about later on is how you can search for a donor nowadays. But back then, I like to call it the Stone Age of transplantation, because it was 2007 and social media, I think, was like at the MySpace level at best. And so searching for a donor was a very different story back then. But luckily my parents, they weren't good Irish Catholic families, but they were good German Catholic families, which was pretty much the same thing. So I had plenty of aunts, plenty of uncles, plenty of cousins to search through. Again, I was very fortunate for that situation. And not everybody has that. Not everybody can do that. But I did. I ended up getting a phenomenal kidney from my cousin Tristan. And well, in finding that kidney, we had some setbacks. So the first major one, and why I say this is a chicken and egg thing, was my father was slated to donate. Now, he was healthy enough to donate. He was cleared for donation. We had the scheduled transplant ready to go. 36 hours before that transplant, we were told that I would reject his kidney upon final cross-match results. And the surgery was canceled. So from there, we started looking in the family again and ended up with my cousin. However, while we were kind of searching for that cousin and getting tested and all of that, we were looking for some sort of national program. And at the time, paired exchange was in its infancy. They had done a few cases. There were a few regional programs, but they weren't at the strength that the National Kidney Registry is now. They weren't at a place where they could really, really push forward a transplant en masse. So there were a few, like I said. One required us to actually move to Wisconsin. There was a lot of weirdness going on there, and it wasn't feasible. Again, luckily I was able to get my cousin's kidney. But after I received that transplant, was doing well, my parents said, okay, well, how do we prevent other people from being in this situation? How do we help people who are in this situation? Because there should be a national solution, right? And so we said, well, let's give it a try. Let's see if we can make that happen. And looking around at these offices and the names on the walls and whatnot, I think we succeeded pretty well. So it was a very personal situation of why the National Kidney Registry came into existence, and how I ended up working here was that I graduated college and my father said, great, I have a bunch of programmers. They don't know where commas usually go, and I need somebody who knows, grammar, so like you can do websites and emails and stuff. And I said, sure. So that was kind of how I ended up here. At the time, we were a very small company. I think it was the 10th employee hired, but we've grown exponentially since then. We're about, I think, almost 65 strong, and wow, just growing every day.
Wow, what a great story. Thank you for sharing that. Beverly, I understand it was your idea to bring this topic to DKG. Can you talk with us about that?
Well, yes. Yes, a few weeks ago, I was attending the DKG New Jersey State Organization Convention, and I had the opportunity to meet a member, Mary, who shared with me that she is currently in need of a kidney transplant. And her openness and her courage in sharing something so personal left a really lasting impression with me. It brought me back to the Stone Age as well, Samantha, back in the 70s when my uncle from my childhood was on dialysis. And our family lived in this constant anticipation of the call that an organ donor would be available. And that experience kind of shaped my understanding of both the urgency and the hope tied to organ donation. So hearing Mary's story reminded me how deeply this issue affects individuals and families. And it sparked the thought that raising awareness about organ donation and kidney transplants could be a meaningful and impactful initiative for DKG members. So I'm curious, Samantha, when you say National Kidney Registry, is it national?
Yes.
We're an international organization in 17 countries. Or is it just the United States?
So for now, it's just the United States, but we do work with over 100 transplant centers across the country. And we have tried to do some programs for international donors to come here. The problem with international situations is we move very, very quickly. And, Canada's reached out. Other places have reached out, but they're structured for a much longer process and lead time to transplantation. And again, we're very turnaround type of an organization. So it doesn't really match up well at the moment. But like I said, we are working on some programs for international donors to come here and be supported through our donor protections.
So for our listeners who are hearing about your organization for the first time, what does the National Kidney Registry actually do?
Okay, so the core of it is paired exchange or paired donation. And what does that look like? Well, Beverly, perhaps, you needed a kidney and a friend wanted to donate. But in the event that you are in need of a kidney and you have a potential donor, say I need a kidney and my father wanted to donate, but like what happened, he's not able to because he's not a great match. But he's a great match to you and your friend is a great match to me. We swap. And so what we at the National Kidney Registry do is figure out kind of that middle ground of who goes where and then how to get the kidney there. That's kind of the core principle of who we are.
So it's an actual registry.
Sort of.
Okay.
We don't do any of the testing. So when you potentially get onto our website and register to be a living donor, you're registering through us, but you will be guided to a transplant center to do testing and whatnot. We don't handle that side of things.
Okay. So how are you different from the traditional transplant waiting list system?
So the waiting list is for a deceased donor. We do not work with deceased donors. We only work with living kidney donors. We only facilitate living donation.
Okay, so that's quite a contrast because you're talking about the experience defined by waiting and uncertainty, while the other is just an intentional act of generosity that can transform, that waiting into hope is really what you're saying.
Correct. So it really gives the patient a better outcome. For one, living donor kidneys typically last at least twice as long, if not longer. And there are, of course, other contributing factors to that, such as how great the match is, how well you take care of it, etc. But on average, a kidney from a living donor lasts twice as long as one from a deceased donor.
That's interesting. So what does kidney failure look like in real life for patients and families?
So it looks like exhaustion. I'm not a medical professional, so I can't give you all of the symptoms. I can tell you how I felt. Exhaustion. I got really, really skinny because I wasn't absorbing nutrients very well. It can lead to all sorts of other, side issues. For example, severe anemia. That actually was what led to why I would not have been able to receive my father's kidney, because I had 2 blood transfusions because of how thin my blood was. As a result, I built up antibodies, and my father unfortunately had a few of those. So it can look like a lot of things. Like some people stop urinating and they can only have water pulled off of them through dialysis. It ends up in swelling. It ends up in gout. It can lead to gout. It can lead to some eye issues as well. It kind of takes its own shape for everybody. but generally speaking, that's what you can kind of expect. Mostly the biggest one is fatigue. That is the biggest part of it. You're just exhausted. You can't get off that couch. And for your family members, it can be very trying because, you're not able to be there with them, for them, and they might have to, start taking care of you as well.
Okay. You explained earlier about the kidney pair donation in pretty simple form. That was easy to get. Can you describe what does a kidney swap actually look like?
So a kidney swap is paired donation. It starts, generally speaking, with a Good Samaritan donor or a voucher donor. The voucher program was developed by the National Kidney Registry to allow people who wanted to donate but had a specific time limit, a scheduling issue, and they were getting a little older perhaps, be able to choose when they could donate and then provide a voucher, which leads to prioritization through the NKR for a living donor transplant later on when they're ready for transplant, should they ever need one, etc. There are a couple of variations on the voucher program. One is for those who are obviously in need, and one for, just to protect your family. But it generally starts with a voucher donor that goes to somebody, either a voucher holder or a paired recipient. Their paired donor then proceeds on in a chain. We have had many of those. They have ranged from, we have the Guinness World Record for the longest swap, which was 30 deep. And nowadays, they kind of tend to be 1 or 2 transplants only because of the voucher program, how easy it is for the donors, the hospitals, our logistics team, et cetera, to manage those shorter swaps.
Okay, so that leads me to my next questions. If I were to use myself for an example, I could reach out to you and say, I'd like to be a kidney donor. Put me on your voucher program. Is that how that works?
So
and then
yes, you select that you would like to be a voucher donor.
Voucher donor. Okay. And so that would answer the question then, if I were to go in as a specific person to try to be matched, let's say to Beverly, and I learn I'm not a match for her, then I could put myself in that voucher program, right? Because even if you're not a match with someone, doesn't mean you still cannot donate your kidneys. Is that what I'm understanding?
All you need to be able to do to help, say in that situation, Beverly needed the kidney. In order to help Beverly, all you'd need to be is healthy enough to donate, which is what the transplant center is there to determine.
Okay. Oh, that's very interesting.
She would then receive a voucher after you donated. She would go to any NKR participating center and redeem her voucher and be prioritized in the NKR's paired exchange network for a transplant herself.
I still don't understand.
Don't worry, it's really complicated. You're not, don't worry about it. So the idea is, so let me give you the real world example. It's so much easier to understand this way. So our first voucher donor was a judge out of California whose 6-year-old grandson looked to need a kidney at some point in his lifetime. He was not in need of a kidney at that point. However, the judge was 61 at the time. 65 was pretty much the cutoff. Now it's grown since then, and it's really up to the transplant center to make that cutoff. We've seen people in their late 70s donate. But at the time, he knew that he was potentially approaching a point where he would not be able to donate and not be able to help his grandson. So he made the decision to donate as a voucher donor so that he could donate when he was healthy enough, when it worked for his schedule, etc. And should his grandson ever need that transplant in the future, he would be prioritized for that living donor through the NKR because the judge had already donated on his behalf. Now, kind of the flip side of that was our, I believe he was our 4th or 5th voucher donor who was in the military and only had a short window of leave where he was able to donate. And his mother needed a transplant, but she was not necessarily cleared for that surgery at the time. But he could only donate during that 1 month. So he donated as a voucher so that he could pick when he was able to donate. Donated, recovered, was able to go back into the military. And later on, his mother, once she was cleared for transplant and was healthy enough to go through that procedure, proceeded on to receive a kidney. Making a little bit more sense, right?
It's fascinating.
Okay, good. Now, then there's the kind of the alternate version where somebody just wants to donate to help somebody, and they don't know anybody who potentially might need one or is in need of one. But, kind of the concern that sometimes comes up in that situation is, well, what if someday my family needs a kidney? Someone in my family, one of my kids. So we allow through the voucher program for people to name up to 5 family members who can then receive a kidney. Only one can redeem. The first one to kind of raise their hand is the only one that can redeem. But should any of those family members who don't show any signs of anything, but just want to be protected anyway, they are then protected through the voucher.
So they're actually volunteering to donate before their loved one might need a kidney.
Correct.
Interesting.
And many of those family voucher recipients never actually need a kidney in their lifetime, but they're protected anyway. And let's say it's their mother or, their aunt, they can have peace of mind to go through the donation process and know, well, should the what if of my nephew needing a kidney happen, he's protected.
So what's the most common misconception about the voucher program?
So the most common misconception about the voucher program, about kidney donation in general, is that you can donate while being alive. I know it sounds kind of basic, but there are so many people out there who don't really know that besides checking off the box on their license, that they can actually help somebody now. Donating a kidney is a very safe surgery. Obviously, it's still major surgery. Again, I'm not a professional, but it's a very safe surgery. They want to make sure that you're healthy enough. They're not going to let you go through with it if you're not. If they find something, they will stop you. No matter how tenacious you might be, if they're not comfortable with you proceeding, they will, jump in. But you can donate while alive. You can do that and then proceed to go on and live a wonderfully healthy life as both the donor and then the recipient is able to pretty much get their life back.
We want to take a moment to thank our very first sponsor of Educated Women Uplifted, 2 Country for Nashville. Joelle and Leanne are a husband and wife country duo based in Nashville, known for their rich harmonies, classic country sound, and the way they celebrate friendship, family, and the people who become both. Their music is all about connection, storytelling, and bringing people together.
Lucky me, lucky you. After all the hard times we've been through, it's all better thanks to you. Lucky me, lucky you. I'm the luckiest man I know of, having you in my life. The best day that I can remember.
That was 2 Country for Nashville. We're so grateful for their support of Educated Women Uplifted. To learn more about them, just look up 2 Country for Nashville on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Music, and you can find their tour dates at www.twocountryfornashville.com. Now, let's get back to the episode.
So you described some protections that are in place for the donor. So pretty strict medical guidelines that you're healthy. You've checked all the boxes, probably in bold checks, just to make sure that everything is good. Can you walk us through the financial and medical safeguards for donors?
Sure. So again, not a medical professional. The actual tests and whatnot will vary depending on who you are and what the transplant center requires, et cetera. But generally speaking, it's called what I believe many call it the $100,000 or the $1 million physical. And it's, every life insurance company out there, they don't even hold a candle with their physicals to what you go through to make sure that you're healthy enough. Does that mean you have to be superwoman? No, you just have to be healthy. You have to, not have diabetes. You can't donate if you're a diabetic. You can't donate if you're pregnant, which again seems like an obvious one, but there are rules around kidney stones as well. Some centers will allow you if it's been, 5+ years since your last attack. Others won't. Again, it depends greatly on your transplant center, who you decide to donate at, what they're willing to take. Some transplant centers will not take anyone on any blood pressure medication. Others will take up to 2 blood pressure medications. Some will only take 1. It really depends on your transplant center, what they're willing to work with. So that's kind of the physical protections in place. In terms of the financial protection, so we developed a program called Donor Shield, which is a comprehensive suite of protections in place to remove barriers to living kidney donation. So if you donate a kidney through the National Kidney Registry, either through pair donation, the voucher program, etc., and talk to your transplant center, you will be eligible to receive Donor Shield. Now, Donor Shield covers lost wage reimbursement, travel and lodging reimbursement for you and a caretaker, dependent care, including pet care. We have legal protection should anything arise surrounding your donation. For example, if you take a bunch of time off, your employer, we've seen about 2 of these cases, just full disclosure, can discipline you, potentially leading to a firing. We will help you in those cases as well. Again, very, very rare, but we also uncover complications. So should you get a hernia 6 months post-op, which again, not very common, but if you get any post-op complications, it's usually a hernia because you go back to work a little too soon or you lift something a little too quickly and you go, oops, shouldn't have done that. Anyway, so we cover lost wage reimbursement and travel and lodging for the complication as well. And there are more specific rules on donorshield.com.
Okay, thanks for that. So take us through the steps of I'm interested. This is interesting. I'd like to get myself on this registry to the donation.
So the first step is to go to kidneyregistry.com and click the big red button that says be a donor. There's also others that say see if I'm qualified, depending on which website you land on, but you pretty much just sign up on our website. From there, you'll be taken through a series of questions, medical screening questions, and then potentially all the way to lab work, in which case you will get a script to either be taken to a Quest, or you can get a traveling phlebotomist to visit you at a location of your choosing, work, home, etc., to draw your blood. From there, it will go to the transplant center. They will contact you, and what tests they require, that's up to them based on your blood work and what they see when they get all of the test results.
Okay, so let's say I have a transplant center close to my home or in my state, and they say, we're not going to take you because of you have high blood pressure. So can I run over to Alabama and see what they think about me? Do I have an option of going to a transplant center that might choose me?
Yes. So the best thing that you can do to get that taken care of or any questions answered throughout the process is to opt into a donor mentor when you're going through that questionnaire history, workup phase on our website. There are a ton of different buttons that allow you in different places that allow you to opt into a donor mentor. Now, what is a donor mentor? They are somebody who has donated. They are somebody who can help you walk through the different phases of your donation journey because they've been there themselves. They can get those questions answered. They work for us, so they do have contact with transplant centers as well. Should any weird questions of, hey, I haven't been called and whatnot arise, they can intercede on your behalf to a certain degree as well.
Okay. So I've donated my kidney. What does my recovery look like? You said earlier that you can live an incredibly healthy life and do just fine. You have the surgery, and what kind of recovery do you have? Because you talked about possible time off, things like that.
So generally speaking, it takes about 2 to 4 weeks to kind of recover and go back to work if you have a desk job. If you have a more physically demanding job, your doctor will probably suggest you take a little bit extra time. We cover lost wage reimbursement up to 12 weeks. And again, that's because my father was talking to a woman at a deli who was thinking of donating her kidney, but she lifts these giant hams because it's a traditional New York deli and they're giant hams to be sliced and diced for everybody's sandwiches. And she wouldn't have been able to take that time off work, one, because as a deli worker, she's not making a ton of money, but also because going back and doing that physically demanding job would not have been very healthy at the time. So we allow you to heal. Your doctor will talk you through that process of what that looks like given different jobs. For example, we have several donors who work here, one who actually donated while he worked here, and he'll tell you that he was getting yelled at by his boss because he was on his he was on his laptop in the hospital because he had a desk job. He was like, I was answering emails because I was bored. So it really depends on what you do for work. Generally, I've been told by other donors that it's about 6 months to really feel like yourself again, like fully back to who you were and not really, almost not remember that you had the procedure. It takes about 6 months, but time off work is generally 2 to 4 weeks, with a more physically demanding job taking a little bit more time. Just again, so you don't end up with the most common post-op complication, which is that hernia.
Okay.
Hmm.
Fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating. It's very interesting. Going on the opposite, if I'm someone who needs a transplant, I need a kidney, and I know that Mary handed me this card and it led me to you, Samantha, the National Kidney Registry. So, and it has her name on it. So how does that work?
See, now you're talking my language and I can answer these with a lot more confidence. I'm not a donor, so I can't tell you about their recovery process. But when it comes to patients and whatnot, we have several advantages for them, several programs for them, including the microsite program. And so that's where that card comes from. So a microsite is a free personalizable website that allows a patient to share their need for a donor. It's free to the patient. It comes with 250 business cards, which is where you got that business card. It comes with posters with the QR code and the patient's name. It comes with a donor search coach. And these are really cool people because they have done this for either themselves or a loved one. So either they or a loved one needed a transplant, they couldn't find a donor in their immediate family or in their immediate friend group, and they had to go do a full-blown donor search, much like I did, but, with modern conveniences. So from there, they'll go out, they'll post on social media, they'll do yard signs. I've heard people do block parties. I've heard people take signs to, local baseball or sporting event games. I grew up on Long Island, so I would probably take mine straight to a Ducks game. But all of these different things, local businesses will sometimes help promote things and promote those patients. For example, we had one gentleman who frequented a local pizza shop and hadn't been in for a few weeks. And he walks in and he's a little bit skinnier. Like I said, you often lose weight when you're in kidney failure. And they said, "Hey, skinny, what's going on?" And he's like, "Well, I'm skinny for a reason." He proceeded to tell them what was going on. The guys behind the counter. And they're like, "Oh, well, they happen to have made a side business from their couple of pizza places of selling dessert pizzas through the mail." And so with all of their dessert pizza boxes, they will put one of his business cards in.
Wow.
Yeah. So, there have been so many different ways people have taken that microsite program and showcased their need for a donor. Some phenomenally interesting ways, some very, very normal ways, Facebook, Instagram, again, yard signs, putting those business cards in the weekly bulletin at their church, etc., to have found that kidney.
Doing a podcast.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
So what is one thing that, Samantha, that you wish everyone understood about kidney donation?
Well, again, it kind of goes back to the fact that it is possible, and that's on both sides. So I've run into many patients who also don't fully understand their options. So it's not just, people not really realizing, wait, I'm a decently healthy human. I can go and donate my kidney. It's also, well, wait a minute. I don't have to live on dialysis. There is some, I don't have to wait for a deceased donor and wait for a 10-car pileup on the BQE to proceed with my life. Really? There's an alternate to that? I think that's kind of the biggest misconception around transplantation as a whole, is that there are living donations for kidney and liver. And I think they've actually started doing a couple of lungs as well, but I don't know anything about that, so please don't ask. But you can live a very healthy life, with one kidney, both as a patient and as a donor, and that living donation is possible. Again, both for patients and potential donors. That is something that can happen and does.
So that's our takeaway. Living donation is possible.
Yes, that would be the most succinct way to put it. It is possible for both sides of the equation.
And you said more successful.
Absolutely. So living donation lasts at least twice as long, generally speaking, on average. But it also allows for more planning to go into the process. So the match can be more hyperanalyzed. Not only is the kidney healthier, but the better the match, the better the outcome. So the better that donor is matched to that patient. That's why paired exchange is so important, not just for those people who don't have a compatible donor, but, they haven't found a match. Well, they don't have to, because even if they do find a match, well, what kind of match is that? Is that the best match possible for you? Maybe, maybe not, but through paired exchange, because we work with so many different hospitals, so many different locations, we have potential for a patient in Florida to be matched with a donor in Cincinnati. And then that person's intended recipient and that voucher recipient can get a kidney from somebody in UCLA. And the genetic makeup of all those different people makes those matches better. Because they're not, a potential sensitizing event like I had when I was a kid, where I had a blood transfusion and it was from somebody who had a similar genetic makeup to my father.
Interesting. Is there anything that you'd like to add that we haven't thought to ask?
It's a very good question. And I always stumble over it. I apologize for that. But, well, one is for patient, the messaging for patients and donors is a little bit different, right? For potential donors, this is safe. You can live a healthy life. In fact, there have been many studies where donors live longer, actually, and it's because of all those tests. Like, again, I said, they're not going to let you go through if you're not absolutely healthy enough to do so. But there have also been arguments that it's because of the emotional boost that you get from helping someone. But from the patient side of things, just that there are programs out there to help you find that donor. You don't have to rely on, again, like I said, a 5-car pileup on the BQE to move on with your life. You can start looking for a donor. You can take that agency back, and you can go out and you can talk to potential donors yourself.
Well, Samantha, today's conversation has been so informative. Thank you. And a powerful reminder behind every statistic is a human story, and that one decision, an act of generosity, an act of kindness can truly save a life. And we really appreciate you walking us through this process and sharing your journey with us, helping us to better understand the impact of kidney donation and the work that's done through your organization. I'm frankly blown away that, out of your situation, which was so serious, your family had the insight to begin this wonderful registry to serve so many others in the United States, and how you also are trying to work abroad as well. We understand that you made several references to the website. Can you give us that website name?
Absolutely. The website is kidneyregistry.com.
Okay, www.registry, kidneyregistry.com. Okay,
kidneyregistry.com. Yes.
Okay, perfect. Well, to all of our listeners and viewers, thank you for joining us and for supporting this podcast. Samantha, thank you again for sharing your powerful story with us. There were several times that were inspiring and thoughtful and just wide open for people to consider this opportunity of giving and generosity. So until we see everyone next time, thank you and have a great day.
Thank you.